Joined now by the co-host of the Bob McKellen podcast, the former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, Mr. John Shannon. How are you?
I'm great, boys. Happy Halloween. And I got to tell you, those are great costumes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we were quite festive here.
And as a podcaster again this year.
I was going to say, a good old spinning cat truck driver. So.
We love it when you drop sponsors into the program.
Very good. We wanted to ask you, Rick Tocchet is getting a lot of praise here in Vancouver for the Canucks 5-2-1 start going into this game against Nashville tonight. How much credit do you think he deserves for this Canucks start?
I think he deserves a lot, and I can only think back after the Philadelphia game, guys, when everybody was saying, "Holy smokes, Rick's gone off the deep end already, trying to create accountability." Well, you know what? There is a time and place for it. And obviously, Rick Tocchet knows when that time and place is, because the team has really, they were playing well before, and then they had a bad night in Philly, and they played great since. And, there is something to be said for somebody of Tocchet's ilk as a player, and then with his experience in Tampa and in Arizona, and even as an assistant coach in Pittsburgh, about feel for his team and for the game. And it's really come back to roost, I think. And the other thing to point out is I know it was hard when Bruce got let go. I know it was soap opera-ish when he got let go. But this team now is paying dividends of allowing Rick Tocchet to coach the last, 25 games of the season. Because he knows this team, and he was able to have a summer of thought process on what would make this team better. And then the additions that the team has made and allowed them to be much more defensively responsible. And dare I say to the naysayers, the Hronek trade looks pretty good now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, the Hronek trade not only, but the Soucy and Cole signings as well. I mean, think of where this team would be without adding 3 NHL caliber defensemen between last deadline and now. So Ilia Mikheyev, you'll have to remind us, John, from your years watching him there in Toronto, just because it has been so long since we have seen him as a primary penalty killer for the Vancouver Canucks, given the injury and given the fact that they're sort of weaning him back into the lineup here, taking it easy with him, particularly on that back-to-back on the weekend. Remind us, what kind of penalty killer is Ilia Mikheyev?
Well, he's committed. He remember, this is a guy that, when he's at 100%, he's one of the fastest guys in the NHL, and speed kills. And if you can have that speed while you're shorthanded, then there's something to be said for that. He's a smart player. His hockey IQ really is at the top end, guys. And I think that's one of the reasons. I know there were people inside the Maple Leaf organization that did not want to see him leave. They just couldn't afford to keep him. And when Canuck money started to roll in, it was difficult to let him go. He's a smart player. He understands the game. The one aspect of it is that he has shown flashes of offensive skill, but not where I think a lot of people thought they would be. But at this point, I think that his contributions, while the Canucks are shorthanded, I think will get well noticed.
I don't know if you've seen much of the Canucks this year, but do you see Ilia Mikheyev's speed there yet? Have you?
Not yet. No.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I don't, and that's what I'm saying. If you talk to a Maple Leaf fan or someone within the organization, that's the first thing they would normally talk about with Mikheyev. And I suspect after all this time off, that's that's between conditioning and actual muscle memory. I think that's something that's going to take a while to come back.
I think we underrate, though, just how good a thinker he is, though, because we should really extend this back to last year before the surgery, where he was hampered by the knee as well. He still finds a way to contribute. He still finds a way to be a part of the mix here, and he's not even at 100% yet.
Yeah, and I think that again, just hockey IQ is, I'm not going to say off the charts because that's not fair to anybody, but I do think that he should get credit for being a lot smarter on the ice, knowing parameters, which is one of the reasons I think that, if this coaching staff thinks they can kill penalties, I think that's a really valid point, because they can see what he can do in key situations, particularly on the defensive side of the puck.
Well, to John's point about his hockey IQ, I thought he was terrific in the half court, especially in his first 2 games back. Like, it looked like he had chemistry already with Kuzmenko and Pettersson. So, yeah, no, if you're telling me the best is yet to come with Ilia Mikheyev, I can believe that, and that would be a tremendous development for the Vancouver Canucks. And you'll have to mind my partner, John Shannon. I know you watch every Vancouver Canucks game. As the pride of all, he is a late night. He is a late night owl. He sits there. He watches the Pacific Coast game.
He watched the Habs and Golden Knights last night.
He watched Habs and Golden Knights last night. He's not your typical Eastern media guy who's not paying attention.
That's true.
To the Canucks.
I'm just a Nighthawk, boys. You know, I would tell you for the longest time, the best hockey starts at 10 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah, it's true. And boy, watching that Vegas Montreal game last night, you're not lying. That was terrific.
Was that fun or what? I mean, gosh. And I'll tell you what, if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, you have to be really optimistic about what they have done there. They still have some things to improve. But you know, when you think of the resurrection of Sean Monahan, what he's doing, Nick Suzuki, who did not have a good year last year, he's played well. Cole Caulfield's the real deal. As the guys at the broadcast last night were talking about, he might be the greatest 3-on-3 hockey player in the NHL right now, and he can still shoot the puck when he's 5-on-5.
He's like the forward version of Quinn Hughes. You know, before we, or shall I get us derailed here for a second in mentioning this? Look at how many anticipated average teams to downright bad teams that are doing well right now. The Anaheim Ducks, the Montreal Canadiens, the Winnipeg Jets. I don't think many people had high hopes for them at all. They're above 500 right now. The Preds are a 500 team. I don't know that they were being criticized a little bit going into this game. Like
Detroit to a degree.
They were deemed to be, I think, an average team. They're 6-3-1. What is going on, do you think, here, John? Is this young players coming in and making a much bigger impact than they ever have before, or at least since the 80s, maybe being able to drop into a lineup and immediately make a team better?
Well, I think there's 2 things to talk about there. First of all, I'm going to use the same phrase that when teams are 1-5-1, they use. They say it's early.
Oh, of course.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it's early.
But you look at bad teams last year, John. It was hard for those bad teams to have any spell of time where they go 6-3-1, much less to start the season.
But this also speaks to, I think Greg Cronin has done a really good job in Anaheim. I think that understanding what kind of players you have. By the way, Cronin is going to have a phone call today with I suspect Colin Campbell to talk about his antics at the end of the second period last night. Rightly or wrongly, the league doesn't want coaches to be doing that type of thing, and he will get a very firm slap on the wrist today by hockey operations. But I think that what you're seeing, though, is transformations of guys and the abilities. Like, timing is everything. Steve Yzerman's done an amazing job and been very patient, and so is the fan base there. All of a sudden, Dylan Larkin has somebody to pass the puck to, and Alex DeBrincat. Mo Seider on the blue line for Detroit. He's a stud. Steve Yzerman's done a solid job there. Everything's progressing. Same thing in Ottawa. Even though there's lots of people that are ticked off that DJ's not doing what they want to do and they could be better. But there's on the other side, you look at what Seattle's done so far this year. And other than last night with their success in Tampa, they haven't been the team that we saw play last season. So I think as many teams that are being successful early on in the season, there's another group of teams on the ledger like Edmonton, like Calgary, like Seattle, all of the Pacific Division, by the way, that can that are probably doing a lot of internal thinking of what they need to do better in order to get back on track.
Pittsburgh 3-6. Oof.
Oh, wow.
No. There's another story. That is another story for another day.
Is it?
Can
Do
we
you
make
think,
that?
do you think Mike Sullivan is the coach there next week when we talk?
I do. But I would think that over the next couple of days, I suspect that there will be some very, very difficult discussions between Kyle Dubas and Sullivan of what's going on. I actually had suggested to me last night by somebody in and around the Penguins that somebody might have to pay the price.
Well, that's
I'm not sure who it is. I'm not sure who it is, but somebody might have to pay the price. You know, that power, they had 2 5-on-3s. One was successful, and that's the Cronin issue. They had a 5-on-3 for almost 2 minutes at the end of the third period last night. And Sidney Crosby touched the puck once. Sidney Crosby touched the puck once. Now, I don't know about you guys, and I've never coached in the National Hockey League. But if I'm running a power play, I want Sidney Crosby to be a little more involved in the power play than most people.
Well, I saw Rob Rossi's tweet last night, who basically laid it out, and you know, they made all these changes. They've decided to give Crosby and Malkin a last gasp here to see if they can get back at her, even though they've lost all these first rounds in a row. New GM, you just don't have a lot of levers available to you right now, other than a coaching change, and that's not to say Mike Sullivan is a poor coach, anything but. I mean, a 2-time Stanley Cup winner. He's been fantastic there.
Mike Sullivan would be out of work for about 7 minutes.
No, exactly. And he is that guy. You know, he is that guy that you wonder whether other teams would move on their guy to hire him. But staying on coaches here, because I do want to get to this. You mentioned Greg Cronin in Anaheim.
Yeah.
You know, Rick Tocchet in the early going here, John, saw opponents get the preponderance of power plays. He bit his tongue. He bites his tongue on Saturday night when Elias Pettersson gets clearly tripped in the overtime by Chris Kreider, who winds up setting up the game winner going the other way. I do wonder whether Tocchet is picking his spot here vis-a-vis the edict they were given from Commissioner Bettman about the behavior of coaches, yelling, screaming, veins popping, all those things earlier in the season. And then Cronin last night, you don't see this a lot in the NHL. Like you see it in baseball, coaches getting ejected. But you don't see coaches in the NHL get ejected, let alone get the extra 2 minutes on top of the delay of game 2 minutes for the unsuccessful coach's challenge. So they threw the book at Cronin last night. And I do wonder, you know, whether or not we're in the midst of a war here between the league office and the coaches in terms of deportment.
Well, I don't know what that, by the way, last year, because I was shocked to see a coach get a game misconduct. You know, there are lots of things that I think I know a lot about, and I don't see that very often. I can tell you last year of 1,341 games or whatever it is, there were 3 game misconducts given to coaches last season. So
that still seems high.
I know. I was shocked. So the other thing about this is that Cronin's a rookie head coach. I suspect that they're trying to put him in his place. Like, you know, if this was Peter Laviolette or Todd McClellan, I suspect that they probably would have been given a little more leeway than a guy who's coaching his 9th game in the National Hockey League. So from that perspective, I think that's part of it. But this is one of those things where this has been a message I think that the league has been trying to push on the clubs to stop, you know, talking about the brand of hockey. Stop, you know, you if you're the chef at McDonald's, you don't tell them that the meat's not good. You know, you have to support the system at some point. Whether you agree with that or not, that's exactly what I think the NHL is trying to tell people in this scenario, is that don't bash the product that much. It doesn't help us try to sell the game.
If McDonald's would like to advertise on Sekeres and Price, the meat is just fine, by the way.
Let me ask, though, officiating, what have you made of it in the early going here? Do these coaches have a right? Do they have a beef?
Well, that's good. They have a beef. I like that.
Yes.
With McDonald's. That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. I don't know. I mean, I think that when you get an end of a road trip, like Anaheim was on the end of a road trip, people are tired. You know, officiating hasn't changed over the years. I mean, officiating's officiating. They do their best. They try hard. They miss plays once in a while. You know, the one thing I would say is they miss plays. They do it, and it's, you know, it is what it is, guys. There is no controversy. There is no glut of bad officiating. It is just, it's at the same level all the time, and you have to learn to live with it.
They do get edicts, though, and
sure, they get memos every day. They get, you know, there will be a discussion with the group of guys that officiated Saturday night. Hey, you missed this call or you missed that call, or I talked to some people within the league office that said, sometimes our young guys interpret the rules a little too tightly. So they constantly interact with the guys. What we don't do, unlike a player who gets suspended, unlike a coach who gets fined, we don't hear about those things when it comes to officials. We don't. And that's the NHL not airing its laundry publicly. And that's just, we're going to have to deal with that. We don't like it. We want the officials to be above reproach too, but that's just a fact of what's gone on in the league.
This is not a complaint, but they are calling penalty shots.
I love it. Don't you?
I mean, the penalty shot went away during my late youth and early adulthood. Like they weren't there at all. Like it was water cooler talk. Like, did you see that there was a penalty shot? Now it's almost a nightly occurrence.
Like in the dead puck era and the neutral zone trap, there
were
were no breakaways.
Yeah, there was no way to get one, I guess.
No, I look back at how many penalty shots. I mean, I think we're into double digits already this season.
I think so. Yeah.
Of penalty shots. Last night in Vegas, Jack Eichel got a penalty shot in overtime. When would we have ever thought that there'd be an overtime penalty shot? He didn't score, by the way. But that to me tells me that they're trying to be a little more liberal in their interpretation of it when a guy goes one-on-one with the goalie and the defender's either behind him. But I've seen a couple of penalty shots that I would have told you the defender was beside the shooter, and they still got called for the penalty shot.
Yeah, Sean Couturier got one versus the Canucks in Philly. That was, very surprising.
The referees just hate the Canucks. We all know that.
No, it's not that. It's just that he was slashed, but maintained possession, got a great chance on goal, and still drew the penalty shot.
Yeah. I think there's
completed breakaway. So
I tell you what, I will make a promise. I'm going to find out before we talk next Tuesday if there in fact has been a liberalization of the penalty shot rule.
Got you.
12 penalty shots this year. 2 guys have 2.
Oh my gosh.
Andrew Kopp and David Pastrnak have 2 each.
I think David
crazy.
Did you find that on NHL Edge?
No, just .com's
regular. I think David Pastrnak actually had back-to-back games, if memory serves.
Oh wow.
No, maybe it was. I don't know.
Could be. I don't know.
Answer me this, because we looked on with perhaps a tinge of jealousy, perhaps a tinge of they look cold, to the Battle of Alberta Heritage Classic Sunday from Edmonton and Commonwealth. Of course, we had our own dance with a Stadium Series game. I can't call it an outdoor game, John, because BC Place
didn't even have the new
was
roof,
closed for
did it have the new roof
Canucks
at that point?
and Senators. I
don't think it did.
All those years ago. Are they just wholly against any kind of cross-border Stadium Series game not involving the Leafs? Like, could Canucks and Kraken one day beat a Stadium Series game either down in Seattle or up here, or is that just not work for either side of the ledger broadcast-wise?
No, I think a Vancouver-Seattle scenario. You tell me where the rivalry is. You tell me where the rivalry is.
Some would say it needs some stoking, and maybe that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, well, I think the league is probably going to say, well, if Seattle and Vancouver ever got a playoff series, then let's start talking about the future of things like that. It's going to be a very interesting test this year for the Winter Classic in Seattle from a ratings perspective. What kind of numbers will a Vegas-Seattle hockey game draw in both countries on New Year's Day? It may not be the best number. That may force us back into seeing those teams that we always see: Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Boston. That's where the fact of these things is that you have to have compelling these. Toronto, Detroit will always draw. You know that. Mm-hmm. Toronto, Detroit, one of those cross-border things. And yes, I think that unfortunately for awareness, the fact that Toronto's led by an American player, I think that probably would help any interest in a cross-border outdoor game again.
help me out on this one, because years and years ago, this guy over here, and I'll give him credit, fantastic take, said at some point they have to take it out of the stadiums and bring it sort of into nature, like create the pond hockey feel.
Yeah, Lake Louise.
I know it wasn't the most successful at Lake Tahoe because of all the, weather and climate issues that turned up there. Do you think they could ever set up a stadium at Lake Louise or Whistler Village or Mystery, Alaska, or any of these places that would create a backdrop, or is that just not going to happen after the Lake Tahoe experience?
Well, two things. First of all, it'll never happen in a national park. It'll never happen in a national park, just for environmental concerns. The other thing is that you have to do the numbers, and you're going to have to find a way to create a stadium, and you probably need 40,000 seats. So is it cost efficient? Is it cost efficient to build a stadium for 1 or 2 games for a lovely view of, the Coast Range or the Rocky Mountains or somewhere else? And that's really that's the toughest thing to discern. Right. My answer is, in the end, not a chance. For that reason. The revenue is, they go to the outdoor games. Yes, it's romantic. Yes, it's exciting, but it's a big check when you sell 55,000 seats.
Hey, lastly here, are we going to see Kevlar neck guards as grandfathered in like shields were? Will that be the legacy of Adam Johnson?
Well, unfortunately, it has to be negotiated. It's not as if the commissioner or anybody considered say, boys, you have to do it right now, and there's no discussion. It's part of the CBA. I don't know if you remember, guys, Jay Feaster wanted every one of the Calgary Flames to wear ankle guards after a couple of his defensemen broke ankles blocking shots. And so he went and bought them and threw them in the middle of the room, in the dressing room in Calgary, and said, put them on. And they said, we don't have to. And this is going to be, at this point, it's going to be personal preference for each individual player until Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman come to an agreement. And Marty, in the end, is in a very difficult position because he doesn't make the decision for the players. The players tell Marty what the decision is.
There's a lot of performance reasons for visors and guards to be annoying. I still would suggest it, obviously. There's not a lot of performance, reasons to not want to wear a collar. I mean, mildly more hot, I suppose you could make the argument, but it's not going to make your wrist shot worse. It's not going to make your visibility with the puck worse. It's not going to make your skating worse. So, to me, this is a lot easier negotiation than the other two.
Agreed. Common sense on top of everything you talked about, Blake. But players are finicky when it comes to personal equipment. Yeah. And I mean, you guys have been around rooms enough to know what you've seen, some of the stuff guys wear and that have been wearing for years, even though it's probably antiquated by now and it doesn't really protect very much. So as much as we want to say this is on the league, and the league can push this mandate, this one's on the players. This one is squarely on the players to protect themselves and to protect their fellow players.
There he is. He stays up late watching Canucks games, never misses one, and he'll have penalty shot data for us going forward this season. The one and only John Shannon, everybody. Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Fitting Canada is your local dealer for cat equipment built to handle work in Western Canada. Visit fitting.com for a location nearest you.